Welcome, everyone, to this session. I'd like to just invite our opening speakers, if they might join us on the stage. Mr. Colina from Spain, Mr. Galvão from Brazil, Marlon Roberts, Mr. Roberts from Jamaica. Please come and join us. Thank you. And of course, Ambassador Helen King, who is here with me from the UK. Great pleasure to have you all with us. Thiago, are you okay? Okay. So thank you, colleagues, and thank you, everyone, for being here early on a Monday morning at the beginning of our second week at the High-Level Political Forum in 2026 as we move into the ministerial week. It's really wonderful to have so many colleagues from across civil society with us, to hear from our excellent panel of different government representatives. I want to start by introducing, so my name is Ollie Henman, I'm from Action for Sustainable Development. We've been partnering with Civicus, our good friends, and of course the UN Foundation. I'd like to thank Marina and the whole team at the UN Foundation for providing this wonderful space at the Ford Foundation, and of course we'll be hearing also from the Ford Foundation, also a great partner of civil society, for providing this opportunity for us to gather, to be able to share some ideas, and to be able to connect together at this time. And I know that it's been a very highly subscribed event, and thank you for arriving early. And I know that some people are also joining online because we had so many interested and also colleagues joining from other parts of the world. So greetings also to those joining on Zoom. So today we'd like to reflect a little bit on this notion of how we shift the power. It's been something that's been discussed quite widely within civil society, and we're hearing more and more now from different governments around the need to really bring financing, funding more to the community level and to be led by the community needs. Locally led development is something that we see much more in many different strategies now. And in particular, I think it's important that we reflect, and we heard in the first week at the HLPF from the Secretary General's report that at the same time, ODA, Overseas Development Assistance, has been dropping significantly. We heard a 23% drop in 1 year, so a quarter less funding available than was the case in previous years. So how do we reconcile that? You know, a reduction overall, but at the same time, if there is less ODA available, how can we make sure that that ODA is well targeted, that it actually reaches the communities that are most often left behind, that actually serves their needs? That's really the focus of today's discussion. So I'd like to start by inviting Ambassador Helen King, the new ECOSOC ambassador for the UK, to outline, there's a new development strategy in the UK, another new Prime Minister, and we see a renewed interest in the development side of things. So over to you, Helen.
Great, thank you. Hello. Hi, hello everyone. Great to see you all. It's an absolute pleasure. Delighted to be here, and I'm more than delighted to be in the air conditioning. So thank you very much for that. Yeah, the SDGs are off track, as you all know. We're all very invested in the SDGs, but we know that 35% of the targets are off track. We've only got, by my calculation, 3.5 years to go. So it's clear that we need a different model of development, and I don't want to say too much because actually I'm quite keen to listen to all of you and listen to my colleagues on the panel, because I think there are no easy solutions. But in terms of the UK's position, we had a very successful Global Partnerships Conference in May, which we co-hosted with South Africa, Children's Investment Fund Foundation and British International Investment. I particularly have a soft spot for BII because that's the role I used to do back in London, working with BII. And a key element of the work that they do is shifting the UK model from donor to investor. And as you say, there has been a decrease in ODA around the world, and regretfully the same case for the UK. but moving towards a model where actually we focus on the big international financial flows had already made sense. So I think we were already in a sort of beyond aid a sort of peace of mind. And we know that if we can get the international financial system reformed and operating and getting the flows, the big flows of money into the global south, then that will be much more effective than ODA. So donor to investor is the first shift. Obviously, really important for today's discussion, the shift to localization. So being as local as possible, as international as necessary. And of course, supporting local ownership and local leadership makes complete sense. So anyone who's a practitioner, who's been in the field, will know that those who live and work locally know what the priorities should be. They know what the possible solutions might be, and they know what the barriers are. And so it makes complete sense to shift the power down to local communities, to civil society, to local businesses and groups and leaders, and particularly women and girls. There's many children I've spoken to over the years who've got good ideas. So I think really important that we focus our efforts on supporting those who know what the answers are. And I think kind of moving away from an ivory tower of policy making by people who actually probably don't understand the issues that well. So we have signed up for the OECD DAC call to action. So all development actors signed up to that will accelerate support for locally led development. We're investing in stronger local leadership. So despite the reductions in ODA, we are investing in a £39.5 million civil society programme. So putting the money into the local community. And the programme's designed to reform how international NGOs work with local partners and shift decision-making closer to communities. And then there are a couple of other things I just wanted to mention over the page, which is that we're supporting community-led action on HIV through new philanthropic partnerships. So again, looking at different sources of finance. And third, we are creating new communities of expertise which connect partner countries with UK and international experience, ranging from climate and energy to health, jobs and technology. So where the UK has expertise, we are very keen to bring that to bear and work in partnership with those who are on the ground and know what the solutions should be. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And it's really interesting to hear that shift that's happening across the UK. And it was very welcome that you were also able to join our civil society plenary at the HLPF on Friday and to talk about that new civil society program that you mentioned. So we look forward to hearing more, and I'm sure there'll be many in the room that would love to get more involved in some of those discussions. So thank you. So if we can perhaps turn to Sergio from Spain next. How does the Spanish government see this shift, and how are you working to bring about new partnerships?
Thank you so much, and thanks to the U4 Foundation, the UN Foundation, and of course you guys for making this space possible. Once again, I think we all know that we gather in times of stronger pressures on financing for development, humanitarian needs, also questionings of sustainable development policies and geopolitical tensions that are putting pressure on all that we work for. So I think this kind of spaces and multi-stakeholders dialogues are more important than ever. I would like just to start maybe with two main messages, and then I will go more into details. But I would say that it's important for us to reinstate that the question is not, despite all these pressures and etc., on whether international cooperation and sustainable development policies are relevant or remain relevant, but rather how we should all work together to ensure that they remain effective, legitimate, and transformative. So I think that should be the frame for our conversations. And then second, to remind also that last year we had the 4th International conference on financing for development, where we already agreed on a quite balanced, of course, like any agenda with its elements that could have been strengthened, enhanced, but I think an globally agreed agenda with a balanced approach on financing for development, including the role of different flows and including the role of different actors from a comprehensive understanding of sustainable development and finance. So I think that it's also important that when we have these discussions on how to remain relevant, impactful, that we have these frameworks in mind. Because I think in these critical times, it's important that we just not maybe continue to reinvent the wheel, but rather that we focus on implementing the agreements that we have and really show results, because there is, of course, I think a legitimate question, sometimes legitimate, sometimes also a little bit biased question on efficiency, impact. So I think our focus should be really on delivering on what we agreed for. And in this framework, as I mentioned, there is this broad understanding of the different kinds of flows and different kinds of actors. So on the flows, I would say that I think, an important recommitment that ODA is still relevant. Of course, we have to work to really focus and understand where it has the most added value, the most impact. But I think we also know that it still has a unique role, especially in certain contexts, be it fragile contexts, being least developed countries, landlocked countries, small islands, development seats, but also some sectors and some vulnerable groups, or some sectors such as public health, public education, where not necessarily other flows will naturally flow or maybe are the best position. So I think, of course, we need to be strategic with ODA in this context of decline at a global level that you reminded us about. Spain has been increasing its percentages of ODA in the last years, 12% in 2023 and 13% in 2024. But beyond volumes, which of course it's also part of the commitment, but I think it's important also to remind us of this specific unique value that it has. But at the same time, of course, to remind us that we know it will not be sufficient. So that's why we have a broader agenda that approaches ODA in relation with other flows that are also important. And there is a big focus on greater mobilization of private investment. We also want to remind, we always remind that it's important that these private sector flows are oriented to sustainable development impact. It's not just about mobilizing any kind of private sector flow, but aligned with sustainable development, but also domestic resources mobilization. I think it was also seen during the process that this has a central role, and progressive taxation, stronger international cooperation on taxes and fiscal justice have a strong role, not only in terms of quantum, but also of quality of what we are able to do with enhanced domestic resources mobilization. So those were a little bit my comments on the general framework, but more specifically on shifting power. I think also the acknowledgement of the role of different actors in that agenda is important. So on the one hand, you know that we also presented a new feminist cooperation strategy by the end of last year. So we really believe that sustainable development will either be feminist or it will not be really inclusive and sustainable. And when we say that, we mean really a strong focus in transforming structural barriers for equal rights and equal access, and putting, of course, the rights of women and girls at the center of all our actions. But it includes also many action-oriented, I think, lines of work included in the Sevilla commitment, like financing care economies, moving forward to fiscal systems that are gender sensitive, of course, eliminating all violence as a precondition for any kind of sustainable development, etc. Linked to that, also the role of civil society. So that's why also we are putting a strong focus on support to civil society, direct support to organizations, protection of human rights defenders. I think it's important also to identify that it does not necessarily aligned with a vision only based in investment. So I think, of course, as we mentioned, mobilizing investments is crucial, and that was part of Addis Ababa, and it's still more part of the new agenda. But there are also other elements that need to be there in order to have impact on sustainable development, and for us, protection of civic space, democratic participation, institutions that are transparent and accountable are essential also and should be part of our cooperation, be it at the bilateral, regional, or multilateral cooperation. Then you mentioned locally led development. We also joined the UK and other partner countries in this OECD's call to action, locally led development. I think there are many important elements on how to shift our relations and how to move forward to more impact in different dimensions, because of course there is improved funding for local actors, but there are also elements on locally led monitoring, follow-up, evaluation that I think are also important for credibility and monitoring. It also connects with the humanitarian agenda and the grand bargain and the commitment to really work with local organizations and local markets. And finally, that's why also in the framework of the conference, the Sevilla conference, you know, that we put in place a platform for action where countries, civil society organizations, private sector, academia, another actor that I think also should be put in the equation. And there is a whole chapter on science, technology, innovation for development that it's also important. So we put forward a specific initiative on localizing development finance for SDG impact that I think is working quite well. So again, also a call for civil society organizations, private sector, academia, to really take a look at what initiatives were presented in this platform, which are working, what can be of interest for you, and really ensure this participation of actors beyond government, international organizations, and the UN there. So I just to conclude, I think it's really important to have this broad picture and to understand that really we will not be able to move forward and have impact if we are not able to create or strengthen innovative alliances that include government, but also local authorities, civil society, philanthropic entities, development banks, United Nations, other organizations, all have a part to play. And I think we can understand this renewed commitment with financing for development as a puzzle with many pieces where we all have a role to play. And then it's about maybe to identify where we can have more added value as differentiated actors, but also how can we be more effective together by generating this kind of alliances or what we call like coalitions of the willing to really focus on topics that we all think we can just add capacities, knowledge, funding, and then be more effective in moving forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and really comprehensive outcomes there from the Sevilla conference as well, and it's great. I know that many colleagues were there and would like to see that follow-up, so thank you for reminding us and for setting out that next step that comes from Sevilla. So now we'd like to turn to Brazil. You have a great experience in Brazil in terms of building partnerships and really building from the grassroots through to the national level. I'd like to turn to Thiago Galvão from the National Commission of SDGs to give us your updates. Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Ali. Good morning, all. It's a pleasure to be here. Very happy to have this opportunity to represent our National Commission for the SDGs in Brazil. And of course, our government are working hard at the last 3 years to implement that agenda. I will bring some insights from our experience in Brazil. First of all, to congrats all my friends in this session here, Ambassador King, Director General Sergio Colina, Marlon Roberts. Oli, thank you again for the invitation. I think first of all, from the Brazilian experience, we are understanding that place participation, social participation at the heart of the process of implement the SDGs, it's key for his success. It's almost impossible to understand that what we are going to achieve by 2030 without the civil society organizations and all this, the society participation in different levels and in different segments of the society. It's almost impossible to see that. Of course, if you are not on track, I think the impact and the transformations are already be felt at this point, and at 2030 we are going to check for this. I think will be the greatest revision that we could do in 2030, and we are going to see how important the agenda was, you know, because we lack that historical perspective right now. But when we get there in 2030, we are going to see how the agenda was important to transform the reality of people. So we have to trust a little bit on the agenda. I think a little bit optimist on that. But placing the participation at the heart of the process means that we have to increase the capacity of have spaces of participation and protect the ones that exist right now that are menaced by some different kinds of setbacks. And that space of participation, they should engage who is not working with the agenda yet, and who could deliver more for the agenda. We have a lot of part of our society that could deliver more, and I have to address that for the private sector. The private sector, it's very important. It's key also for that, and I think it should deliver more for us, for the governments, and for the society. Also, we have to strengthen who already is committed to the agenda. People that were working with the agenda before the agenda exists. We have a lot of people that were working in more the 2021 agenda or before the 21 agenda, and there is a historical process of engagement and human rights and environmental rights, etc., etc. A lot of people that give us the institutional memory necessary to have this agenda delivered. So at this point, if you are looking to the future, we have to see that the people that work in this agenda should be strengthened in their whole to deliver that agenda. And I was telling that in another session that we're having, that I think when we didn't have the social participation in Brazil and the civil society organizations in Brazil, this agenda wouldn't exist, because the government gave up of the agenda between a very important moment in Brazil. So it was the civil society organizations that kept the agenda going on in Brazil between 2016 and 2022. So, and that because that person, the people that were working with different kinds of agenda decide to keep that agenda alive. So now we have to give them the right strength to keep going on, because we don't know what's going to happen for the next years. But probably they are going to be the guardians of the agenda, but not the agenda per se, but the ideas, the values, the principles that are inside that agenda. So that is important also. And of course, we are talking about more abstract things, but that means that we have to have democratic architectures of participation. We have to strengthen the councils, the committees, the public consultations, all kinds of space that you have in your country that could give the people the power to shift the way that we deliver the agenda. And also we have to give them the means of implementation. If you don't have money, people can't participate. Then can't travel to places like that to be here. So this is a very important issue in Brazil. We are trying to figure out how to have more people engaged in this kind of space of participation. And of course, when you get here, we need that UN understand, Oli, that we have to open a little bit more the spaces of negotiation also for civil society organizations. We know that it's very closed and very difficult, and sometimes people come here just to stage or to perform, and we see that a lot regarding, for example, indigenous people that came here and try to have your voice heard, but sometimes it's just much more a performance than a right way to impact the negotiation process. So we have to increase civil society organizations' capacity to be part of this decision-making process nationally, internationally. Brazil has this tradition of having civil society organizations in their delegation, in our delegation. Our national delegation, we make this example. That's important. It's a way to have her voice heard during the process of participating. Of course, it's not enough, but we have to try to improve that. And the second thing that I would like to address to you today, we have this idea of spaces of participations, but also we have to change our horizons of expectations. So the horizons of expectations, it's for the government, it's too tight or too low because of course, there is a lot of commitments that the government has to do and to make to keep going on in an electoral time or for this term of governance. But if you listen more to the civil society organizations, actors and actresses, we are going to improve our horizons of expectations. You know, we can learn, we can do better our public policies. So we can't stand for this low horizon of expectation. Because the civil society organizations are here to challenge us, government, and that's part of democracy. We have to have that, you know. That's very important for us in Brazil right now. So we need to listen more and to learn more from the civil society organizations. I will give a very quickly example of our SDG 18, that for us it's a huge thing, you know, to have our own SDGs on ethnic racial equality. It's the 18 SDG for Brazil. And that came up only because of the civil society organizations that give us like the momentum to challenge the agenda and give us the institutional memory of a fighting that is going on in Brazil, how many decades that people are fighting for racial ethnic equality in Brazil. So that was the base that give us the momentum and the strength to, okay, let's try to have a new SDG to Brazil, voluntarily to Brazil. But it's serious because now we have targets and indicators. So for the next VNR, we are going to measure our accomplishment regarding the SDG 18 because we have targets and indicators. And that is a kind of example that you listen to the civil society organization, you can improve the way you deal with public policy in general. And also, in Brazil right now, it's impossible to debate or dialogue about sustainable development without deal with ethnic racial equality. So this is the Brazilian contribution to that debate that is open right now to what is going to be to 2030 and beyond. So I think this is a track that it's inevitable. We have to address that more firmly as countries and our international community. So the SDG 18 gives us and has a very, very firm and concrete impact domestically and internationally, because a lot of countries are interested, and we are a dialogue with other countries about that. And finally, just to say that shifting the power of delivering the SDGs need us to strengthen the basis of our democracies. So we have to face the huge inequalities that is still persistent. We have to make the delivery of the SDG path-dependent to social justice, inclusiveness, and distributive justice. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Thiago. There's so much there that we would love to have more time, and I'm sorry that we have a limited time this morning, but we hope this is the beginning of a conversation. So let me move now to Mr. Marlon Roberts from the Jamaica Institute for Planning, Planning Institute of Jamaica. Perhaps you can also address some of these points in terms of how Jamaica has been championing locally led development.
Good morning. Good morning. First, I want to thank the UN Foundation and the Action on for Sustainable Development for hosting this forum. I think this conversation that we're having comes at a very crucial moment in the development space. For Jamaica, a small and developing state, when we speak about shifting the power for SDG development, we view it as how can we make decision-making more decentralized, where we can get our local actors, our local communities more involved. In fact, Jamaica has led this conversation, has been participating in how we can, get our local groups more involved in decision-making through our 2016 local government legislation, where the legislation, it provides for the multi-stakeholder participation, development planning, monitoring, and policy making. So shifting the power to local actors, it would mean the structure of governance or how things traditionally has been done would have to be changed. You can't include local actors in the conversation if the structure of governance has not been adapted or changed. So it can't run parallel to how things have always been done. In the case of Jamaica, we have developed our own national development plan, which is the Vision 2030 Jamaica. And this plan involves a multi-stakeholder input into how national development is, one, how it is conceived, how it is processed, and how it is executed. We have a medium-term framework that assess how far we are in achieving certain of our national priorities, our national goals. And within this this framework, we also include our stakeholder groups. We have the youth, we have civil society, we have community actors that participate in that process. But we understand as a country that development doesn't happen in a vacuum. That while you would have your frameworks and your systems in place, that as a small and development state, we're vulnerable to the events and actions far ashore from Jamaica. Geopolitical crises, climate disaster are the most recent example that I can give is that Jamaica is currently rebuilding from a major Category 5 hurricane. And while we went through that, we were also recovering from a Category 4 hurricane that affected the island just a year prior. And understanding just what a small and developing state goes through when we speak to climate resilience, these events can somewhat detour your development progress. And as we're here on this panel speaking to development assistance, unfortunately or regrettably, in the case of Jamaica, we have seen a decline in ODA assistance by 70%. Just to even give you more context on that, the numbers is that over the last 5 years, we have seen ODA assistance. It has declined from $350 million to just $87 million. So while we welcome and appreciate Spain's continued support in providing ODA assistance, we understand that there is a change in the dynamic and a change in the development environment. But Jamaica can't sit and wait to be rescued. So we have been a bit steadfast in how we look about our own development. So in response to the decline in ODA, Jamaica has engaged in alternative sources of funding. So we have really been moving towards this concept of blended finance. So we utilize international lending agencies, the World Bank, the IMF, and also international partners to see how best there can be collaboration in the development of projects, programs that can spur development, that can reach to the grassroots communities that need the assistance. And I'm going to give one example of a project that Jamaica has that's spearheaded with the support of development partners. It is our Project STAR. So what this project is, it is the coming together of development practitioners or police, civil society groups to work in communities that are at risk or high risk communities where we have a significant level of violent activities. And this is going back to when I said, shifting the power has to be decentralized, where it can't be a case that you have the government implement a program without the input of civil society. Well, we may understand, at the granular level, what happens in these communities. We need the persons that are involved in the communities to tell us how can we, contribute to change in these areas. So this is what Project STAR has done. Instead of having the government being the main voice in this project, in this program, we have left it to the police, we have left it to the civil society to, while we have secured the funding, they're the ones who carry out the programs, carry out the activities within those communities. Another thing that Jamaica has done in response to a decline in ODA is to scale up our private-public partnerships. This to mobilize the non-traditional funding sources. So we rely on our private sectors to come on board to provide support for certain initiatives or certain programs. Another example that I can give is our Biggie program. That's boosting innovation. I want to get the word. I want to get it correct. Boosting innovation, growth, and entrepreneurial ecosystem. So this is where we had funding from the Inter-American Development Bank as well as the European Union. And what this funding did was that it drove private sector-led investment into particularly for our MSMEs, our micro, small, and medium enterprises. So trying to wrap up. But right, so as I've said before, when we speak about, shifting the power and the whole decentralization mechanism that is entailed in that, before I wrap up, I want to share just a few reflections, maybe 3 reflections from our experience as a country. So coordination infrastructure deserves the same funding attention as individual projects, because that is what enables actors to lead and participate consistently rather than when a project cycle allows it. Second, fiscal and institutional capacity constraints in SIDS demands a commensurate response through national and local action, as well as partnerships that recognize the immense costs associated with vulnerability. And finally, we have to foster multi-stakeholder approaches to development that are sustainable and resilient, thereby safeguarding the gains made through our collective efforts. So Jamaica has already been leading this initiative, and we've already been doing the work to shift in the power. So what we need from this multilateral moment is that the architecture of cooperation that exists is that it now catches up to that reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And it's really powerful to see the direct impacts of that changing environment and how Jamaica is adapting and finding new ways to work. So thank you for those very concrete examples. So colleagues, we are a little short of time, and I know that a number of people will need to leave for the opening of the ministerial session shortly. But I'd like to invite Mr. Otosaki to speak from Ford Foundation, as you prefer. There are mics, or please. So from a foundation point of view, how are you viewing this shift?
Thanks, Oli, and good morning, everyone. I'll try to be very brief so that I don't, take up much of your time. And also the beauty of speaking last is you could easily say, I agree with everything. So these reflections are partly, my own reflections based on what is just transpired in this room. So I think the first to agree with is the closure of civic space, and I see Mandip in here. We have to reckon with the fact that civil society is struggling to operate in this current moment. Spaces are closing, civil society is being criminalized, it's being targeted, and that's undermining the ability to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So I think that's one thing to grapple with. The second part of that is the moment that we are in right now, we are seeing the decline in ODA, but would rather call it a shift in ODA. It's shifting to other priorities, and those other priorities have the potential of causing more global instability. If we look at the issues around defense, if we look at the issues around militarization. So how do we grapple with that if the world is becoming more conflict-ridden than it has been before? So thinking about the shift and the decline in that perspective. The second dimension I think we have to look at as foundations is that there are other actors who are emerging that we are not, talking about. As a foundation, there are new philanthropy that is emerging that has got, more dollar investment than we might have as Ford Foundation. And we are seeing this in China, we're seeing this in India, we're seeing this in Brazil. So how do we work with those new forms of philanthropy that we might have historically not engaged with that are out there? That's another point only that we are grappling with. The other dimension I think that we need to think of is locally led development and the shifting the power. It's not a new conversation, but I think there is a moment that we are in right now that is making it more exciting, making it more interesting, because ODA countries are shifting or declining in funding and therefore wanting to see more involvement of local communities. Maybe the framing is more of locally resourced development than locally led, because the flows are shifting, and for that reason, how much of the domestic resources are going to be used for development? And I agree with the ambassador when she spoke about the international financial architecture. And there's a foundation, that's something that we're grappling with, that the international financial architecture is not designed to allow for global South countries to actually thrive. They're surviving, but they're not thriving, right? So a good example is the UN is debating the UN Tax Convention. How many of the ODA, OECD countries are supportive of that? Because that's a way of unlocking domestic resources that will be required for purposes of development. Another dimension that we need to look at is there's a narrative of deficiency in many of these countries. Countries in the global South are seen as if they are begging, they are desperate, but there's so much resources, human potential, financial, among others, that we have to start thinking of tapping into so that we progress towards the implementation of the SDGs. So just to wrap it up, foundations such as Ford, among others, I'll never be able to speak, exhaustively of what we are doing. We do have the historical legitimacy and the credibility, but there are certainly others whom we need to think about. There was mention of private sector. Yes, private sector is important. It's important to work with private sector, but we also know that there are also harms that comes with private sector. So how do we put the safeguards that are required with private sector investment? Because the motive might not necessarily be sustainable development. The motive might be profit, then development otherwise. So how do you reconcile with that? Funders also have a responsibility to think deeply around some of the connections of these issues. And we might also have to think and change our own perspectives and ways of engaging so that we value and we listen carefully and deeply to some of the reflections that are coming from the field. So let me just put it an end there so that allow for a conversation. But thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to Otto Saki and to the Ford Foundation for all the support that you do provide to civil society around the world. It's very much appreciated. So we only have about 10 minutes left, I'm afraid, but I would like to take a few observations. I know that we do have one that I'd like to turn to first, Gabriela Pulvermüller, who comes from an angel investment network, so maybe part of this new way of thinking of financing. Yeah, please, over to you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my name is Gabrielle from Germany, from the Red Salt Foundation. Yeah, we are this kind of new investors. We invest in blind spots. So my personal background is finance. I'm an entrepreneur. I've been buying, building, selling companies together with private equity before. But since I've been 12 years old, my honest wish was to have an equal world. So yeah, after I sold my last company, I took the chance to learn about entrepreneurs in low-income countries. And those entrepreneurs, they really are in a blind spot for investors. That's simply because they have an unattractive risk and return profile. And they also lack the knowledge how to grow and scale their businesses. And that's why we are doing these investments. We are investing in equity. It's not repayable. And we are really partnering with the entrepreneur how to grow and scale their business. And yeah, as you said, Ambassador, these businesses, they are the key to sustainable development. They create the jobs. They solve the local challenges on ground. And we really see amazing solutions for the local challenges. And I want to say, especially the women, they become the role models on ground. And when they grow, they become mentors and even investors themselves. And I want to mention one really enormous blind spot in the world, which is women in Afghanistan. And I'd like to hand over shortly to Dilan, who is working on that.
Yeah, I will be short. Okay. So my passion for these works comes from a very personal place. I was born in Kurdistan, and I know how it feels when systems and structures do not include women. So I know we all know the situation in Afghanistan. However, women in Afghanistan are well educated. They have university degrees, and also they have like their own businesses. What they need is a change in the system, and that is what we are doing. We are building an Islamic microfinance institution in Kabul, so we can support them and help them. As Gabi said, we invest, we partner, and we stay. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that powerful example. I think we have time just for a couple more observations. Yeah, we have one here and one at the back there. Yeah, so this one. I think there should be a mic on the table.
That probably works. Thank you. So I'm Stephen Webb from the International Federation of Library Associations. I think it was fantastic, this emphasis on not getting lost on the what we do with the SDGs, but the how is a really valuable thing. And I'd really like to call out both Jamaica and Brazil that your VNRs, I think a great strength is that you are focusing on the cultural aspect, and thinking about the role of culture forces us to localize. It's something that Spain's done in previous years. I think my question is around, you've talked very much about the localization, the role of civil society. How can we make sure that then all of the other actors at that local level, especially local government, institutions like libraries, are ready and able to form part of an ecosystem that really actually delivers?
Thank you. And one, Jyotsna at the back there. Yeah, there should be, is there a mic on the table there?
Thank you so much, Oli. Thank you so much for this organizing this important event, and again, very, very structured event. So nice to see the governments talking about and realizing the contribution of the civil society and how you can extend, how you're extending support. So that's very heartening to see. My name is Jyotsna. I'm working with Forest and international civil society organizations. We have membership in about 73 countries, and we did a report on localization partnership in I think last year we did, and it was nice to see how some of the civil society workers are actually working with the government. And again, I gave an important example of Nigeria yesterday, that how some of the local governments are really helping the civil society. They're working together. So my question was that, what do you think, what are the concrete changes that you think are needed to ensure that the partnership of the government and the civil society, they move beyond the rhetoric and genuinely shifting the power, resources and decision making to local actors? Thank you so much, sir, for talking about the shrinking civic space and also the role of private sector. I completely agree with you. So I'm not very sure about the role of private sector, because we really wish the private sector came together or they help, but I did not see much report from private sector working on localization. So yeah, if any insights on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jyotsna. I think we can take one more, perhaps the gentleman at the back. Yes, one last one, and then we'll come back to the panel.
Thank you very much. My name is Willis Ochieng. I'm the executive director for CREATS International. That's an organization working with grassroots communities. I really welcome this conversation because it's moving us from this top-notch kind of conversation to the grassroots level. And I can bear witness that locally led development is much needed because we are closer to communities and we listen to more of those conversations. We bring that cultural nuances that nobody else can. One thing that I wanted to also reinforce, the ambassador spoke about shifting from more of the donor to an investor. That is very much welcomed. But how do we make sure that we build the capacities of the local organizations so that they are able to tap into these resources? Because, for instance, you mentioned BII. The ticket size for BII for local organizations is super high. So how do we make sure that we have that in a way that local organizations can actually tap into it so that we move these communities from simply surviving to thriving? Thank you.
That's a great question to end on, and I'm very conscious of time, so I'd like to give each of the panel 1 minute to respond to some of those questions. Please.
Thank you. So to try and answer two questions at once, if I may. So I think in terms of what's the big change we need to invest, as ladies said over here, invest in private sector and local business and partnerships on the ground. And in particular, BII, British International Investment, is very focused on Black-led and women-led businesses. And often we see sort of Western private sector coming in and then sort of swooping out again. And that's not what we want to see. We want to see business being invested in locally and developed and being able to grow. So it's donor to investor, and then obviously the support that is needed to grow that business. Very important point that you make, sir, on the ticket size. So for BII, it's £5 million. We have other instruments that kind of fix that gap, including the Global Investment Innovation Fund, which I'm part of the board for that. And that's about mobilizing investment into sort of grassroots, creative, innovative ideas and reducing the risk, as the lady said. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much. If we just go back along the panel, shall we come next to you, Thiago?
Okay. Just to share some ideas, I think this idea of the blind spot, it's very important to because it's the focus on we have to see and to act. So for a blind spot in Brazil, we have this idea of to shed light on a blind spot. So the civil society organization in Brazil decided to bring some not a shadow report, but a light report. That's the idea, to measure, to try to monitor the agenda when the government was not doing that. So I think this is kind of example that we have to put light on those blind spots. And I think that's important because most of our vulnerable populational groups are invisibilized. So we have to give them the opportunity to speak or to be seen and recognized in those kind of spaces and instruments and mechanisms. Regarding the idea of the inclusion in general, but the inclusion of women and other populational groups, I think that Brazil had this opportunity to nationalize the targets of the global targets. We try and we did that in Brazil, and we nationalized. And the nationalization brings us the opportunity to show that instead of only talk about women, we could talk about women from the forests, by the rivers, and et cetera, black women, specifically addressing those populational groups that are invisibilized. So that's interesting regarding the way that we need data also. The disaggregation of data brings us to that debate, et cetera. But that's important. And that it's totally connected with this idea of culture, that we have to change the culture. And the SDG is the way that is bring us, and I think I lost my mic, but thank you. And I think the SDG is give us the opportunity to change the culture. And change the culture means like we have to change the conception of sustainable development. I was talking about that. So, and that brings us the opportunity to address the local governments that people are asking about. And there's different ways to engage them. We could invite them. We could recognize what they are doing, but we have to recognize because a lot of people are doing a lot of very incredible things around it, but we have to recognize that and bring them to that ecosystem that we're talking about. If you give them that opportunity, of course, they are going to grab that and to be inside that ecosystem. But we have to hold people and institutions and local government inside that ecosystem. So that's the thing that we have to do. For that, you need support that we talk about, to have an architecture and to have means of implementation. And then you have to account them responsible. And that's why the private sector is so important. So the ecosystem just works if you have all those ideas together. And the concrete change, I think it's to transcend the politics of day to day, because the local governments, they are very keen on dealing with, I don't know, maybe a hole in the street, very small thing. But he can understand that the SDGs is a common language for opportunities and new opportunities. So if you give them, the local government, this idea of you can improve the way you do public policy, that could be better, for them. Yeah.
Thank you. So maybe just two examples and on implementation and one on policy about the questions on local ecosystems beyond local and regional governments, which of course are important, but localization goes beyond that. So on implementation, we have been working with the UN Joint SDG Fund, which is a big pool fund. It's supposed to be also in the framework of the UN80, like the reference pooled fund of the UN for the Sustainable Development Pillar. To generate what we call the localization marker. So it means that they do not only have a specific portfolio of projects oriented to promoting localization of the SDGs, but rather that they have like a matrix that every project has to come across in order to be approved. So that's the way of mainstreaming localization approach, not just a niche action, but rather as a cross-cutting way of approaching any initiative regarding sustainable development can be a way of ensuring that this is not just targeting some actors, but rather creating a way of approaching things that involve local ecosystems and territorial impact. Also with, for example, with UNDP and the OECD, there is this integrated national financing frameworks that were also in Addis Ababa and strengthened in the Sevilla commitment. They're supposed to be integrated strategies of every country for their sustainable development strategies and plans for every kind of external and internal flow and actor partner to align with. So we are working with the international organizations behind the INFFs to move them for a second generation that is really localized so that they incorporate the visions, priorities, and strategies of the different territories. And again, that of course goes through local governments, but beyond that. And they are supposed to create, really put in the center of collective efforts, local ecosystems at large, including local businesses and local civil society and local academia. But that's on the implementation, on policy, and we also have on our delegation civil society and local and regional governments. We have decentralized structure and powerful decentralized cooperation also. But we have organs of structured participation. For example, we have a Sustainable Development Council where civil society participates in the follow-up and the design of policies for implementation of the SDGs in Spain. And under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Cooperation, International Development Cooperation High Council, where civil society organizations, but also private sector, labor unions, academia sit. So every time we adopt a strategy or a plan, we have discussed them with all the actors. So it's not a strategy just of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but rather of the whole ecosystem. So I think not just relying on implementation, but also in policy design is a good way to really ensure ownership.
I'd just like to very briefly thank the ambassador. I know you need to be at the ministerial opening. No, we completely understand. Thank you for taking the time with us this morning.
Thank you very much. Love to see you.
So finally, Mr. Roberts.
In the interest of time, I'll be very quick. Just to speak to how we can foster civil society participation in decision making, is that we have to create a mechanism that feeds their input, into policies, into regulations. One way which, just to give an example of how Jamaica does that, is that we have certain committees. We have our National Oversight Committee. We have our thematic working groups. So we have created those mechanisms that we create the forums where they can come, participate, be involved, provide their inputs. But we have to ensure that even though when they provide their inputs, that they don't just provide it and nothing happens. You can't create policies, in a silo. Whatever, once their inputs are feeded, how can that translate into actual policies and regulations? I think then that would now come into the form of cabinet mandates that we have done, and the institutional mechanisms that we can put in place to ensure that their views, their inputs are utilized in the best way possible. I think I'll just stop there because I know that we're well over time, and I know also I need to make my way over as well. So,
well, thank you, and thank you all so much for the commitment. I mean, I think it's been really clear that your governments are all strongly committed to this agenda, and we really appreciate it. You can see the interest in the room. We hope that this is the beginning of a conversation, and we really look forward to further engagement. So thank you again, and all the best for the remaining days at the HLPF.